Locked on Longhorns, the show. Jonathan Davis, your host. John Garcia Jr., Director of Football Recruiting at Sports Illustrated. My honorary co-host is joining the show once again today. And of course, whenever John is on the show, these episodes are brought to you by LinkedIn. Get the applicants you need for free. Tons of jobs on LinkedIn, especially if you're into coaching. I know there'll be some coaching opportunities in Norman, Oklahoma coming up real soon. John, John, I want to talk about rat poison, right? And Nick Saban kind of made that a football term, talking about rat poison, not getting too enamored with the team, not reading the press clippings, not believing what everybody is saying about you. And you can say that Texas may have fell victim a little bit to rat poison after the Alabama game, because everybody was like, "Oh my God!" It was a 20-point spread. They almost won the game and lost by 1, and so everybody was like, "Oh my God, it's Texas. Are they back? They can compete with any team in the country." And then after that, you let down a little bit. You go down 17-7 to UTSA, ultimately win that game, and then the following week you lose to Texas Tech. Now, since then, they beat West Virginia and Oklahoma by a combined 49 points. A combined 67 points. They beat Oklahoma by 49. Now is the time where that rat poison starts to seep back in. You got Joel Klatt saying it's a travesty that Texas is not ranked in the top 15. You got Josh Pate saying that Texas is obviously a top 10 team in the country. You got people saying that with Quinn Ewers, Texas would be 6-0 at this point, right? Like, everybody is basically saying Texas is back now, right? And this is the perfect opportunity to fall victim to rat poison this weekend against Iowa State, because when you look at it and how this is gone, Iowa State has not lost a conference game by 17 points since 2016. But the spread for this game is 16.5 points, according to Bet Online. Texas has not beaten Iowa State since 2018. Iowa State is only allowing 16 points a game to their Power 5 opponents. Now they're only scoring 13 points a game against Power 5 opponents, but their defense has been really good. And like I said, Texas is favored by 17 over Iowa State, who hasn't lost a conference game by 17 in 6 years. Now, Texas has won all 4 of their games by 18 plus points. If you're a betting person, I'm not telling you what you should do either way. I'm just giving you the facts, Not even the Iowa State game specifically, John, because I think they'll win that game. I don't care if they win it convincingly or not. We just need to stack wins at this point. But what does Texas need to do to avoid the rat poison moving forward in the back half of their schedule? Because 6 games into the season, everybody is higher than high on this Texas football team right now.
Yeah, it's a really great question and topic, right, Jonathan? This is where we are reminded, hey, there's a lot of coverage, right? When Texas is on or way off, the coverage comes in droves, right? So you're going to experience it, whether it's social media, the TVs in the cafeteria, whatever it is, you're going to feel it. It's going to reach out. It's going to touch you to a degree. So this is always an important question to pose, because remember, these are in some cases teenagers, right? A lot of young players on this offense in particular, but overall still college kids, right? Young kids that are still trying to figure this thing out. So much easier to slip into the rat poison conversation in college football than maybe any other sport, right? Because it's so overly covered day to day. I mean, look at the Locked On Network, right? It's every single day with every team. So
your team every day,
right? You're gonna feel it at some point. So I do think this is an opportunity not only for the coaching staff to double down on, let's keep everything in house. Let's run this thing like a professional organization and not worry about all that outside noise, but also for some of those older players on defense, right? The guys who have been here and done that through the good, the bad, the ugly, the coaching change, everything, right? Those are the players you expect to start to trickle down and say, hey, let's refocus and regather and hit this work week, which is, between yesterday and today is the beginning of the true work week in college football. And let's hit it hard and prepare for a physical Iowa State program. Because if you look at that game, which won't be easy, right? Right after that, a couple of big-time road trips. And then TCU comes to Texas. So this stretch right here, and then Kansas all of a sudden is more interesting, even though Texas was always going to get up for Kansas, which is funny to say out loud.
College football is hilarious.
Right. I mean, you look at the rest of this slate, these last 6 games. If Baylor is the team that we're not talking about as much as all of the others, think about that. The defending Big 12 champs are the ones that you're like, oh yeah, and then Baylor at the end, right? So this whole thing is a gauntlet here going forward, and I think it's always a good reminder to recenter there, because if the Big 12 championship is kind of the next goal, that has to be reiterated, and you have to follow it up. It can't be one great outing. We've seen Texas do that, right? We've seen Texas do that every year. It feels like one great outing where you're like, are they back? Right? We've been asking that for over a decade. So the key is to follow it up. Good teams follow it up, and it doesn't mean you have to be great. It doesn't mean you have to be very good. It means you got to find ways to win, right? You're going to have dud performances, right? I mean, you look at the best teams, right? Georgia against Missouri, I mean, was on the ropes. I mean, that Missouri team, no disrespect, is awful. Just awful. They can't move the football. They can't set the line of scrimmage. They do have a good defense, I think, but they can't hold the ball offensively. So Georgia even has found a way to win its dud games, even the week before against Kent State. Alabama, I mean, maybe some consider Texas the dud game from Alabama. Maybe it was A&M this past
Alabama
weekend.
fans were pissed after that Texas game. Like you would not have thought that they won that game the way they were walking around. They were pissed.
Right. So you found a way to win, right? It was ugly, controversial, whatever it was, but you found a way to get an impressive road win that looks better and better by the week, by the way. Ohio State, same deal, won some dud games. Michigan was 10-10 with Indiana in the third quarter last week. I mean, this is something every single school at the top or near the top has to experience. You win when things are great, absolutely, but you also got to win those duds, and then you got to win some in between, right? We can't expect Texas to come out like they did against Oklahoma, maybe for the rest of the season, right? That maybe it was their best ultimate stars aligning effort. So again, it comes back to the leadership, the coaches, the veteran players on that roster, even a Quinn Ewers, and I would throw a Hudson Card in there as well. It comes down to those guys to remind you, hey, let's recenter, because this thing is a gauntlet. I mean, Iowa State, Oklahoma State, Kansas State, TCU, Kansas, and Baylor. I mean, there's not a lot of teams that would, on paper right now, be favored in all 6 of those games, regardless of location. Texas might be. They might be. So
Oklahoma State's probably the only one I can see them not being favored in, because they're a top 10 team on the road. But all the rest of those 5, they'll definitely be favored in, regardless of site.
Right. So it's a heck of a gauntlet. So I do think that it's Iowa State will be kind of a breeding ground. It will be a testing ground to gauge just how mature this young offense in particular can become in really short order here. So I do think Bijan has to command that room. Obviously, defensively, there's a lot more maturity from where I sit. So I think it's got to come down to all of those things, because, yeah, the rat poison ain't going to slow down if you keep picking off these ranked teams, especially in the Big 12.
Yeah, we're going to talk about the state of the program with John Garcia next, offensively, defensively, and the coaching staffs. He's going to grade each unit through the first 6 weeks. But, like you said, there's a definite gauntlet in the last 6 weeks of this season for Texas. Tougher, really, than their first 6. If, you can count Alabama, but, Sarkis continuously said the goal for this season was to win the Big 12 championship. And that loss to Texas Tech, it's a bad loss. Josh Neighbors from Locked On Big 12 came on and said it's even weirder now when you can go out and beat a team like Oklahoma 49-0. There's a bad loss to Texas Tech, and it, severely limits your margin for error moving forward, because I've said all year that the teams in the Big 12 championship game will have 2 conference losses or less. Texas already has 1, which means they would have to go 5-1 through these next 6 games to end up in the Big 12 championship. Quick word from LinkedIn, and then we're going to talk about the state of the program. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Like I said, if you're interested in coaching, there might be some opportunities in Norman, Oklahoma coming up, especially at the offensive coordinator position where, he can only coach 1 quarterback, but that's neither here nor there. All right, we're going to talk about our coaching staff for the Texas Longhorns, the coaching staff that showed up on Saturday. Through 6 games, Texas is 4-2. They had a loss that Texas fans and Texas media treated like a win against Alabama. And then they had a bad loss to Texas Tech where we couldn't ignore it, right? And everybody started talking about, is Sark the right coach for Texas? It's crazy how the temperament changes week to week in the Texas fan base. Maybe that's just a college football fan base thing. But the last 2 weeks, this Texas team has looked how they're supposed to look, jumping out to 28-0 leads in both of those games. Through 6 weeks, how would you grade this Texas coaching staff? And would you say that this Texas program is on track, ahead of schedule, or behind schedule?
That latter part is the tougher question, so I will delay my response there, and I'll grade the coaching staff first. Look, I think Steve Sarkisian's done a really nice job. I think because of the, I would say, little bit of experience that Hudson Card had coming into this season, there was almost an expectation. Okay, well, Quinn is hurt. Card will just kind of steady the ship and it'll all be fine. But look, those are two different players. And that's something Sark dealt with last year, his first year in Austin. And it doesn't quite work when you've got, the two cooks in that kitchen. So injury obviously creates a different type of scenario. And I think offensively, you got to be pretty happy with where you're at from a Texas Longhorn perspective, right? You manufactured at least besides the Bama game, 34 points in every game. You mentioned the last two games in particular, quick starts, which is often more pointed towards the coaches, right? Because what is it? It's scripting, it's game planning. It is kind of, this is how we're going to present based off of what works for us and what we think could work against our opponent. So in particularly the offensive side of the football, I think this thing has been a B plus. I mean, this thing's been really close to an A. I do think that the Texas Tech win would have had to, been sealed there in overtime to get the A in my regards. But look, you still scored 34 in that game. I mean, so, conventionally as a football person, you say, well, if we score 34, we should be able to win at any level, high school, college, the NFL included. So I think that naturally pokes a little bit on the defensive side. But at that same token, since that point, which was kind of the wake-up call, right? I think really easy to sell that as the wake-up call. You're in Lubbock, overtime, just a blah kind of situation. That's the wake-up call. Since then, you command right out of the gates against West Virginia, which is still a pretty darn good offense. So to slow them down early was big, allowed your offense to gain momentum. And obviously against Oklahoma, I mean, the defense looked about as good as possible. Again, if we are going to assume, because there's some experience in this type of QB-friendly system that gives the benefit of the doubt to Texas, we should assign that same benefit of the doubt to Oklahoma in that system, right? So in that regard, even though you're facing a backup quarterback, the expectation is nearly the same, right? Nearly the same. So to shut out that group, I thought was really interesting. Oklahoma tried some wrinkles, right? We saw a lot of Jalil Farouk. We saw some Wildcat with Eric Gray and those guys. They tried some outside the box things to compensate for Dylan Gabriel not being there, not being ready. But Texas answered the bell. I thought the front seven looked really good. They were after the quarterback at all times. And I thought the secondary, which is, Jekyll and Hyde at times, really started to round into shape. And again, I think that West Virginia game was a nice confidence booster there, because West Virginia, all those receivers are 6'2", 6'3", big vertical threats. So if you deal with them successfully, you can almost feel much better about your next few opponents. And that holds true with Texas. So I think early on, the defensive staff grade was probably in the C range, not enough turnovers. The Texas Tech, not meltdown, but, letdown, I would say is a good way to put it. You let UTSA jump all over you after the great performance against Alabama. So a little bit up and down. So kind of in the middle, I would say in the C range, but I do think because of the last 2 weeks and the Red River rivalry in particular, you bump that up a little bit. So we're going B- for the defensive staff to this point. I do think they've utilized personnel the right way. Still probably want more in the pass rush, but I think otherwise the front seven has looked really good. And then, to answer the expectation question, JD, I think you're above. I think Texas is above expectation, because The biggest question mark is no longer a question mark, right? Coming into the season, it was, can Quinn Ewers live up to this hype in this state with this group of weapons, which is, by the way, taking a hit. Nobody's talking about that. Basically a rookie quarterback in a new system with less weapons than we thought he was going to have. That could have easily been, ammunition for the excuse gun, right? Hey, well, look at all these circumstances. Alabama and the injury. Easy to make excuses for Texas to not be ranked, right? To not be where they are. So I think having that question so emphatically answered from the Quinn Ewers perspective, and we saw it early on, and we certainly saw it at the beginning of the Bama game, and we definitely saw it against Oklahoma. There's a control there, right? There's a comfort there, and you've still got Bijan. You're still featuring him in creative ways, which I think is really important as well. So I think because of that, the offense has only improved, but the defense has come along over the last 14 to 20 days as well. So I do think you're a little bit above expectation. If you were in the preseason and you said, hey, Texas was going to go and face 3 or 4 ranked opponents in their final 6 games and be favored in all but one with a chance at the Big 12 title, I think every Texas fan would have signed up for it. I think if you would have said, well, it's a little dicey mid-season ahead of this gauntlet, the rivalry game was tough and took a lot out of Texas, and now they're looking to finish strong, I think that would have been closer to the expectation. But this feels above, especially coming off of the high of the game in the Cotton Bowl there against Oklahoma. So I do think Texas is above expectation relative to where it should have been, especially, again, because the biggest question mark, Quinn Ewers, is no longer a question with this team going forward. To accomplish that before Halloween is such a big deal, and Texas has done that emphatically.
We talk about how crazy college football is. Imagine telling somebody that hasn't paid attention to college football for the last 15 years that Texas being 4-2 after 6 games is ahead of schedule, right? So that's just where we are.
Wait till the playoff expands, right? Wait till that thing expands, because now you're in it. Now all of a sudden you're in the playoff positioning. So those records are going to start to mean a little bit less on the front end, and how you look and how it feels is going to be more important than ever, because it's more human input than it ever has been in college football, which most would probably agree is a good thing.
Definitely. So we've talked before on the show, and you talked about, Steve Sarkisian, his moniker being this offensive genius. He not only had to come into Texas and win games, but he had to win games with style and win games with this offense. And I believe we've seen that really at most points during the season. They haven't, outside of the Alabama game, haven't scored less than 34 points. They've won all 4 of their games by 18 plus points, and they've done it with star power on the offensive side. On the defensive side, they are definitely ahead of expectations. I mean, who thought through 6 games this is a defense that would be giving up a little bit less than 18 points a game? So talk about, you can grade the offense with Quinn Ewers, because obviously it's been 2 different offenses with Quinn Ewers and Hudson Card. So grade what you've seen from the offense with Quinn Ewers, and then grade what you've seen from this defense that's allowing 18 points a game halfway through the season.
Yeah, I mean, I think that last part really quantifies it, right? Because again, when you're around the game, there's certain numbers that trigger you to a certain response, right? So it used to be, 300 yards passing. That used to be kind of the mark. Oh, if you allow 300 yards passing, you're not a good defense. And then conversely, if you throw for 300 yards, you're a great passing offense. Those numbers are all skewed now, right? Everybody's running spread. Everybody's scoring a little bit more. So to hear the numbers that count most, the points, obviously, right? It's a scoreboard sport. When the points are under 20, and the offense is going to be good. And by the way, again, Sarkisian deserves credit, because in less than 20 games, he started 3 different quarterbacks, and at least two of them were unplanned, right? It was not supposed to go down that way. So he's had to hand the keys to 3 different quarterbacks, and the offense collectively hasn't really lost a beat. I wish I had the number pulled up for the average number of scored of offensive points for Texas, points scored since he took over, but it's probably north of 30. So if you're north of 30, regardless of starting quarterback, and your defense has improved to allow less than 20 a game, you've got to feel really good about that positioning, because that's a 2 touchdown margin, more times than not. And you feel like, again, when it comes to your dud game and when things aren't great, that you can use as much of that cushion or insurance the rest of the way to pull out some games that maybe you don't deserve, relative to what the game flow and feel is like. So I do think the defense is well ahead of schedule. They're a strong B for me. Again, I think there's a lack of star power there. I think there's, I wouldn't know. I mean, you probably know who's the leader, right? I think optically, what we would probably point
Demarvion, Overshown,
to Overshown,
Agent Zero,
Jameson.
yeah, Keondre Coburn up front.
Yeah, the guys
Yeah.
who have just kind of been there forever, it feels like, right? So that's
Yeah.
kind of the natural lean. But from a playmaking perspective, it is fairly evenly distributed, which is a good thing. It doesn't have to be, oh, hey, we've got Will Anderson, watch him work. We're all going to just sit back and watch him. Not that Bama's doing that, but just the easiest defensive example in the last few years of college football. So I think that unit is a strong B. I think there's still a little bit more to be desired, but you're certainly picking up steam at the right time and allowing yourself to play more free. I think the offensive comfort creates so much benefit of the doubt that now the defense can play a little free, take a little bit more risk, which is, again, that's what the sport has become, right? It's chunk plays, it's turnovers and points. It's no longer about yardage and third down percentage and all that stuff. It's about the big plays that happen in these games one way or the other. And then offensively, again, I think the expectation has always been so high that averaging 30 plus points a game against a good schedule with 3 different quarterbacks right out of the gate feels to some like it's not enough. It's kind of crazy to say that out loud. So that group's an A. You've dealt with adversity. You've got a super young offensive line that has overperformed, I would say, to this point. You've dealt with injuries at the quarterback position. My gosh. I mean, your guy was hurt in game, 3? I mean, it's
2.
Game 2. Yeah. So it's again, it's the fact that he's not getting more love in that regard is somewhat surprising to me. So the offense to me is an A. Even in your worst game of the year, you put up 34 on the road in conference. I mean, it's something that a lot of teams can't say. Georgia can't say that. Bama can't say that. Ohio State can't say that. They didn't get to 34 against Notre Dame. So it's something that not a lot of teams can say halfway through the season. So to me, that's a resounding A, especially when you factor in what we expect now going forward, that this offense, I mean, gosh, keeping it under 35 now all of a sudden seems like it's a win for some of these teams that they're going to line up against.
Yeah, no, you talked about, taking Sark in this offense for granted, and it's crazy. They scored 34 points against Texas Tech on the road, and people were talking about his play calling and the fact that he didn't let Hudson Card cook. It's just crazy, how fast things change in college football. Quick word from Built Bar, and then I'm going to let John just talk about the star of this football team, not Bijan Robinson, but Quinn Ewers. If you haven't tried Built Bar Puffs yet, you are depriving yourself of one of life's greatest joys. And guess what? There's a new flavor. Ready? Delicious, indulgent cookie dough covered in chocolate. That's right. Built has done it again. Let me introduce you to your new favorite. Cookie dough chunk puffs have a light and chewy texture. Real cookie dough chunks, and of course, they're covered in 100% real chocolate. All the joys of eating cookie dough without the hassle of making it. Plus, it's healthy for you. Go to Built.com. Use promo code LOCKEDON15 and get 15% off your order. Use promo code LOCKEDON15. So, John, I did an episode. So this will come out on Wednesday, but my Tuesday episode, I came right out and I said Quinn Ewers is a top 5 quarterback in college football. My top 5 was right. Yeah. Woo. Yeah. My top 5 was Bryce Young. This is irrelevant. My top 5 was Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, Caleb Williams, Quinn Ewers, and then I put Hendon Hooker at number 5. But I said there's plenty of people you can put at number 5. You can put Hudson Card at number 5 for all I care. I know Quinn Ewers is number 4. We talked so much about how he hadn't thrown a real pass since 2020, and there may be some rust there, and will he live up to the hype, and what had he done to deserve the hype, especially in the last 2 years? And he's come in and been better than advertised. I've talked enough about how special the starting quarterback is for the Texas Longhorns and how spoiled we are as Longhorn fans to be able to watch him every Saturday. Granted, he stays healthy. But I want to hear your perspective from somebody that covered him at the high school level and now gets to see it translate to the collegiate level. What has Quinn Ewers shown you thus far? And I guess about 6 quarters of play?
Yeah. I think the funnest thing about watching these kids transition from high school to college is measuring the things we couldn't measure in high school. Look, Quinn, big, athletic, crazy arm. All right. Matthew Stafford comps all over the place. Easy to see, easy to sell. Why he was a big deal going into his junior year, his senior year, Ohio State, and now Texas. That physical stuff, so easy to see. It's the other stuff that I'm starting to like really come around on with Quinn. For instance, his cadence, his ball handling. Some of these creative plays that Sark draws up, it's not simple. It's sophisticated. You're reversing out. You're faking it to Bijan. You're pivoting. The timing of some of these has to be really on point. So what has really impressed me with Quinn is how much he seemingly learned, polished up in the 2 years since we last saw him really play some meaningful football. Easy to not do that, right? When you're the guy and you're the star and you can run and you got this huge arm. Easy to just say, hey, I want to sit in the pocket and sling it. But he's been moved a little bit, showing off some of that athleticism. I think the toughness to come back much sooner than a lot of people expected. I think that is worth saying something. There were moments in that game, and I'm sure your audience is more aware of this than I. There were a couple moments where he was either getting hit or taking off to run that you're like, okay, what is he going to slide? How is he going to take this? And he's diving for first downs, So what's been impressive to me with Quinn is his ability to do the little things well. The footwork has been nice. The decision making has been on point, and the decision to pull back from his own strength, which is his arm strength. He pulled back on it. The whole first quarter, it felt like he never threw it as hard as he could against the rival with the most pressure in the game that growing up in the Dallas suburbs, you knew he was all about his whole life. It would have been so easy for him to get in there and just throw fastballs to everyone, and nobody would have blamed him, at least early on. And the whole first quarter, it felt like 60%, 50%, 70% arm strength. And until that one over route to Jordan Whittington, rolling to his left, by the way, not easy. Until that point late in the first, it felt like it was all easy, scripted, let's ease him in kind of deals. And Quinn bought into that part as well. Again, easy to just not think about when we're talking about quarterback play. And we see these great quarterbacks press at different times. All those guys you mentioned around Quinn, we've seen them press this year at some point, right? And fire a fastball when it's unnecessary, whether it's your national champs to your expected high draft picks that you've talked about. We've seen them press, throw dumb interceptions, and obviously Quinn threw one last week. But for the most part, the decision-making and the ability to hold back and just play within the script, I think has been seamless for Quinn Ewers. Again, the script ahead of that Bama game was on point, A1, all those great phrases we could use to praise. And then even better against Oklahoma. And it had a lot of variance within it as well. So I know he could drop the arm angle and throw it 60 yards and play well on the run and do the razzle dazzle. So easy to shine light on those plays, right? The one TD to Sanders that was up the seam. That was just a gorgeous ball that required, 80 or 90% arm strength. Easy to fall in love with and focus on those throws. But I'm loving what he's doing all the other times, right? 3rd and 6, get that bubble screen out as fast as possible, hitting Worthy in stride without having to put 90 miles an hour on it there for the first touchdown near the goal line. All the off-speed stuff really impressed me with Quinn, and it shows maturity and just things that you can't really judge when they're 16 or 17 years old, because when we watch them at that point, everything is a fastball. Everything is, I want to make the money throw. I want to make the best throw. So there's a maturity with Quinn that has really been impressive just 6 quarters in. So really excited, to say the least, about what he can put on tape here the rest of the way.
No, that's amazing points you just made, because we talked all offseason about Quinn Ewers being a gunslinger. And thus far, we've seen him play within the system. When you look at the Oklahoma game, they won 49-0. The longest pass play of the day was a screen pass behind the line of scrimmage to Roschon Johnson, right? Talk about the gunslinger fitting into the system. John Garcia Jr., Director of Football Recruiting at Sports Illustrated, joining me once again. Always a pleasure, Longhorn Nation. I know he's one of your favorites. And as always, peace.